They thought I was a burden, a fragile old woman in the way of their perfect life. So my daughter-in-law changed the locks while I was at a doctor's appointment, hoping I'd just disappear. But when I pulled up to that house, the one I'd bought 30 years ago, the one I'd let them live in rent-free, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply called the sheriff and showed them the deed. And as they watched the reality of their mistakes sink in, my son's face went pale. Because you see, there are two kinds of power in this world. The loud kind that yells and threatens, and then there's the kind I possess, the kind that owns the roof over your head. If you love stories about justice finally served, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Evelyn. I'm 73 years old, and I've spent most of my life building things, not just a home, but a life of independence. After my husband passed 12 years ago, I managed our rental portfolio myself, 7 properties across 3 counties. Nothing flashy, just solid investments that gave me security. When my son Michael came to me 3 years ago, he was desperate. He'd married Jessica just 8 months prior, a woman half his age with expensive taste and no patience for saving. They wanted to buy a house, but Jessica's student loans and Michael's modest salary meant the banks wouldn't touch them. Michael looked at me with those pleading eyes he's had since childhood. "Mom," he said, sitting at my kitchen table while I poured him tea, "we need help, just for a few years. Once we save up a down payment." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw someone trying to please a woman who would never be pleased. But I also saw my responsibility to family. So I made a decision that in hindsight taught me something valuable about people. "You can live in the Maple Street property," I said quietly, "rent-free, but there will be a lease agreement, everything official. I need to protect myself legally." Michael nodded eagerly. Jessica, when she heard the news, didn't thank me. She simply smiled and began making a list of renovations. The first 6 months were fine. I visited every other Sunday for tea. The house looked lovely, but then Jessica's spending intensified. I'd see new furniture on the lawn, items discarded to make room for upgrades, designer curtains, a new kitchen sink she'd installed without asking, a marble countertop that appeared one week. One Sunday I mentioned gently, "Jessica, remember you can't make permanent changes without—" "It's basically our house," she interrupted, not looking at me. "We live here. It makes sense to make it ours." I felt something shift inside me that day, a quiet recognition. But I said nothing. I simply sipped my tea and watched. A year and a half in, things changed. Michael started working longer hours, trying to keep up with Jessica's lifestyle. Jessica barely acknowledged me when I visited. She'd be on her phone, making plans with friends, discussing her Instagram aesthetic, comparing her home to those of wealthier women. Then came the Tuesday I'll never forget. I had a doctor's appointment for my blood pressure medication. Nothing serious, just routine. I texted Michael to let him know I wouldn't be by that week. I didn't mention I'd be stopping by the house afterward to drop off some fresh vegetables from my garden. When I pulled up to the curb at 2 in the afternoon, something felt wrong. I tried my key in the front door. It didn't fit. My heart wasn't racing. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a clarity. I used my phone to call Michael directly. "Michael, I'm at Maple Street. The locks have been changed." There was a pause. Then Jessica's voice in the background, loud and defiant. "Tell her she needs to go to a home. We can't have her just showing up disrupting our space." Michael's voice came back, shaky. "Mom, Jessica thought it was best. You were here so much, and she felt like you were judging her choices. She wanted her own space. We can discuss this, but not today. I have to get back to work." The line went dead. I stood there on the porch of a house I'd purchased in 1993. A house I'd paid for with my own money, built from my own discipline and choices. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, absolute clarity about who my son had become. I got back in my car and drove to my attorney's office. Over the next hour, I reviewed the lease agreement we'd signed. Jessica and Michael had violated 17 different clauses, permanent alterations without written consent. The language was crystal clear. They had 60 days' notice in the lease before they could break it, but breaking it meant forfeiting their deposit and facing eviction. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to understand something. I wanted them to see that the world has rules, that arrogance has consequences, that you cannot simply discard people and expect no repercussions. Send them a formal notice, I told my attorney calmly, but I'm not asking them to leave yet, not immediately. He looked confused, but he did what I asked. That evening, Michael called, panicked. He'd received the official notice from my attorney's office on LLC letterhead. He suddenly understood. The house wasn't family property, it was a business asset. Their free rent was a legal agreement, not a gift. "Mom, please," he begged. "We made a mistake. Jessica made a mistake. Don't do this." "I'm not doing anything," I said calmly. "You changed the locks on a property you do not own. You violated the lease agreement. I'm simply following the law." "What do you want?" His desperation was palpable. "I want you to understand something," I said. "I want you both to come to my house tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Don't argue, just come." The next morning, they arrived. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. Jessica looked angry, as if I was the one who'd wronged her. I invited them inside. I served them coffee, and then I told them the truth about my life. 42 years ago, I said slowly, your grandfather left me something he built, a portfolio. Over the decades, I've grown it. I own 7 rental properties. I have investments, liquid assets, a secured retirement. I am not a burden. I am not someone to be discarded or hidden away in a home. Jessica's face went white. The Maple Street property is worth $480,000 in today's market. You've lived there rent-free for 18 months. That's roughly $12,000 in value you've received from me. And in return, you changed my locks. Michael put his head in his hands. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady as stone. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property. You will leave it in the condition it was in when you arrived, minus normal wear and tear. You will provide a forwarding address for your security deposit, which will be returned, minus costs for repairs you've made without authorization." "We have nowhere to go," Jessica said, her voice small for the first time. "That's not my problem," I replied quietly. "You had the opportunity to be grateful. You chose arrogance instead. Actions have consequences. You're learning that now." Michael looked at me with eyes full of shame and something else, anger that I wouldn't fix this for them. "I love you," I said to my son, "but I won't raise a man who forgets where he comes from. Not anymore." They vacated in 23 hours, threw their belongings into a U-Haul truck in the middle of the night. Jessica had convinced Michael to spend their savings on that kitchen, those curtains, that aesthetic she craved. They had no down payment, no backup plan. They moved into a studio apartment across town, 600 square feet for 2 people who'd grown accustomed to 2,000. 6 months later, I rented the Maple Street house to the Ramirez family. They have 2 children and a grandparent living with them. The first Sunday they moved in, Mrs. Ramirez brought me homemade tamales as a thank you. I cried for the first time since this began. Michael reached out twice. Jessica hasn't spoken to me since. They've since divorced. Michael told me Jessica had been unfaithful, had been using him as a stepping stone to a lifestyle she thought she deserved. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My son has since rebuilt his life more humbly. He's learned that gratitude matters, that respect matters, that you cannot expect generosity to be unlimited. But here's what I want you to understand, the reason I'm sharing this with you today. The world is full of people who will disrespect you if you let them. They will take your kindness for weakness. They will change the locks, metaphorically and literally, and convince themselves they're justified. Don't be like my daughter-in-law. Don't mistake someone's age or apparent fragility for powerlessness. The people who've built something real, who've earned their independence through discipline and time, they're never truly vulnerable. They're just waiting for you to show your true character. And when you do, the consequences are yours to live with. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in accountability and earned respect, please subscribe to this channel. We share stories every week about justice, consequences, and the quiet power of those who refuse to be diminished. Click that subscribe button now and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And in the comments below, I want to hear from you. Was I right to evict them, or should I have given my son another chance? What would you have done in my position? Let's discuss, because ultimately, family is a choice, and choices have consequences. Thank you for listening to my story.